This is our overtime podcast, which is what we get to do when we don't have enough time in the sermon to say what we need to say. We said at last week's sermon that we have referenced multiple times. We've walked through 1st and 2nd Samuel, and we've seen multiple times that the kings, namely David, he's collecting wives. Mm-hmm. And we've said polygamy is not good. This is going to go poorly for David.
Right.
So what I mentioned on Sunday is we don't have time to just get into the subject of polygamy. But now we do, and that's what this is here for. So my question for you, Chet Phillips, expert on polygamy for this week.
Yes.
Where in the Bible does it say that polygamy is a sin?
Yeah, it does not say that in the Bible. There's not a chapter verse that explicitly prohibits it.
All right, so for clarity, nowhere in Leviticus, nowhere in Deuteronomy, the prophets, the Gospels, the book of Revelation, nowhere does it say that polygamy is a sin.
That's correct.
All right, we have clarity there. Okay, so if that's the case, then let me play devil's advocate for a moment. Then why do we say it's bad?
Well, what you have to do, I think a lot of times we approach the Bible like it is simply a rule book. It's going to cover all the stuff we needed to cover. And people will sometimes say like, well, Jesus never talked about that, or the Bible never mentions that. And it's like, that's not a foolproof plan for proving something is wrong or bad or whatever. You have to put together a whole biblical theology on some of these things and try to understand how does the Bible approach marriage is a question to ask. And as soon as you start answering that question, then it does rule out a whole lot of things, polygamy being one of them. Mm-hmm. In the same way, like how does the Bible, this is the same way we can clearly say that slavery is bad. Now there is a place that says do not be enslaved by anyone. Or sell yourself to somebody, yeah. But it's like we can build it with more than just those kind of places where we just have to have one verse. And so really what you're going to do is build out what does the Bible say about marriage, and then and what's the testimony it gives of polygamy, and you can kind of build we don't need to do this. All
right, so that means that this subject becomes a really good model for the subjects in the Bible that don't have the most explicit concrete commands from front to back. But we actually have really strong ethics and morals for why we actually do the things we do as Christians, and why the church history has practiced this for almost 2,000 years.
Right, and why when someone says something like, well, Jesus never talked about abortion, it just is like, that doesn't, that's a non-argument.
Yeah, all right, so then do it. Actually, walk me through why is polygamy bad, and I would also say immoral. Why is this actually sinful, even though explicitly it doesn't say this is a sin? Go.
Right. Okay. So first of all, just trying to understand how the Bible works. Just because it tells you about a thing does not mean it is promoting that thing for you to do. And just because it tells you someone in the Bible, like an Abraham or a David, who in general was part of God's redemptive history, just because they do it doesn't make it a good thing to do. So the Bible isn't just a collection of moral stories either, where we can always read a story and go, well, what's the moral of that? And they're not all models to follow. We're going to read more things that David does that we should not do.
There's one person in the scriptures that if he does it, it's good. But outside of Jesus, that's
correct. Everyone else, you're going to have to go, well, okay, it's just that sometimes the Bible will just tell you a thing that someone did without giving comment on it. It won't say, and that was good, or and that was bad. It'll just say, they did this.
Yeah.
So that's what we're running into in this section. It does seem like even in 1st and 2nd Samuel, because Samuel, when he talks to them about the kingship, writes up the rights of a king and gives them that they, in Deuteronomy, one of the specific things that's said about kings is they shouldn't get too many horses and they shouldn't get too many wives. It seems like that would have to be in there. And so even when it's mentioning it in Samuel, it does seem like there's a little bit of a note of like, y'all should know this isn't the same way it tells the story we're looking at this week where the Levites should have known how to carry the Ark of the Covenant. It's the same kind of thing. Y'all should know how to do this, and it doesn't go into that. It just is kind of saying we all know they
don't steal from Sunday. You've worked hard on this. Don't.
So anyway, it's that sort of thing. Now, where polygamy comes from is the first guy who did this was in Genesis 4, and his name is Lamech. And it says this, and Lamech took 2 wives. This is Genesis 4, verse 19. He took 2 wives, so it's notable. It wasn't a normal, regular thing until Lamech. Mm-hmm. And then it says, the name of the one, it talks about who they are, and then it tells us that Lamech announces to them that he had committed a murder. I killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. So our introduction to Lamech is he has 2 wives, and he murdered a guy for attacking him, and then he proclaims a greater curse than Cain. He's not a good guy. Like, he just is. So this is the introduction to polygamy, a guy who seems violent. It's not God's original design, and then it plays out that the testimony of it throughout the scriptures is negative. That there's not, it doesn't speak of blessing and flourishing. Even where all the tribes come from was a mess between the wives and between, Jacob and his wife. So it's just one of those things where it's like, even when it's describing it, it's a mess. And when we see it with David, it's a mess. So that's the testimony of polygamy. But when you go back to, okay, so what is marriage? Mm-hmm. The 2 primary things that I think are going to preclude polygamy as an option is the design of marriage and the purpose of marriage.
Okay.
So the original design of marriage is God brings Adam and Eve together.
Okay.
And it's one man and one woman. That's the design.
Yeah.
For life.
Mm-hmm.
When the Pharisees in Matthew 19 start asking Jesus about it, mm-hmm. he goes back to that passage and says it was not. So they're asking him about divorce. And he says, but from the beginning it wasn't so.
Yeah, which that's Genesis 2:24. Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So that's the foundational, that's marriage. This is the design of marriage right here. And that gets picked up in Matthew.
Yeah, so he quotes 19. The same thing and says the 2 have become one flesh. What God has joined together, this is verse 6, mm-hmm. let not man separate. So that there's something mystical and spiritual happening in the physical union and in the marriage union, and that God's actually binding people together, mm-hmm. and that was meant to be one man and one woman. And that's why he calls subsequent marriages adultery, yep. because he's just going to say this isn't God's design. So he's going to point to the design and say one man, one woman. They aren't asking him about polygamy. They're asking him about divorce. But you can see that it would seem similar. He would probably answer polygamy questions the same way, mm-hmm. and say, that wasn't the original intent. That's not the way God designed it, even though it happened. Because yep. that's what they say. They're like, well, Moses gives rules about how to go about it. And he says, yeah, he does that because of your hardness of heart. And there's a whole lot of rules that you can't just say because there's a rule about something, it means it's okay. In the law, because the law has stuff like if someone commits a crime deserving of execution. So you can't read that. It's the same framework for if a man takes 2 wives. It doesn't mean he's done a good thing. It just is, here's a rule around it since y'all are running around doing stuff. And so you can't go, well, then we're allowed to commit crimes worthy of execution. Yeah. It's like, no, that's not a accurate reading of the text. So the design of marriage is one man, one woman. In Genesis, Jesus brings it back up. Paul brings it back up. Mm-hmm. And then Paul points us to a revelation about the purpose of marriage in Ephesians 6. So you have the design of marriage, which means that polygamy would be outside of God's original design and would be something that would come from hardness of heart, just something people are doing that they had to make regulations around. Okay. And then Ephesians 5.
I was wondering, I was like, man, I'm
not armor of God.
What are you pulling it in?
Ephesians 5, I do that all the time. Ephesians 5, Paul's talking about husbands and wives. He says for husbands to love their wife as Christ loves the church and gave himself up for her. So there's this whole life self-sacrificing that is a singular devotion, mm-hmm. which would be hard to do with multiple wives, especially when they disagree or there's, that would be, seems extremely difficult. And if you read the Testament of the Old Testament without having to watch, the TV shows we have now, if you just read the testimony of polygamy in the Old Testament, you can see all the problems that arise from that. And how would you devote yourself singularly, giving your whole life up for this person and for this person seems outside of the design. But then it says this mystery is profound. And I'm saying that it refers to Christ and the church. So he just says, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother, hold fast to his wife, and the 2 shall become one flesh. Mm-hmm. And he says, this mystery is profound. And I'm saying it refers to Christ and the church. So that the purpose of marriage is to mirror Christ's love for the church. Mm-hmm. His singular devotion to the church, his rescuing of the church.
Church, not churches.
Yes. the body of Christ that he claims, that he washes, that he makes his. And so the point of marriage is to point to the love that Christ has for the church, all those whom he will redeem, all those who he saves. And so polygamy is not only sideways with the design of marriage, but it's the sideways with the purpose of marriage. And the design is because of the purpose.
Yeah.
And so if you had multiple wives, you don't mirror the gospel well, because Christ doesn't have multiple sets of peoples that belong to him in a way that isn't unified and singular in his purpose of salvation. So he brings the whole church together and washes and loves the church the way that it says that we're supposed to love your wife. So I like John Piper's quote on this. I wrote this down. He says, now that the purpose of marriage has been more clearly revealed than ever, it is now more important than ever to renounce polygamy.
Yeah.
He just, in talking about polygamy, he just says, we have the purpose of marriage more clearly revealed, then we should more clearly display it, and polygamy would be outside of them.
Yeah, that's that aspect of more clearly revealed. Like it's not just the Old Testament we have. Though I can make a case in the Old Testament, we're seeing some things that are happening.
Yeah, good examples.
The New Testament makes that abundantly clear. Jesus quotes Genesis chapter 2, 24, making that clear. Paul here in Ephesians 5 quotes the same passage, helping us see all along this was the design. In fact, in Matthew 19, the Pharisees are pulling him into a debate amongst two different rabbinical traditions on how to understand divorce and remarriage. And then he's saying, no, all along you should see what the design was. He's trying to answer their understanding of how to divorce, but the application of that shows up in polygamy. This was the design all along.
Right.
Two people, one flesh. That's it.
And the Bible is allowed to tell you positively what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
And you can infer from there things that you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Just like I could say to my son, my older son, hey, you know, we're going to be gone for just a few minutes. You need to be kind to your brother. Mm-hmm. And when I come home and him go, well, you didn't say I couldn't hit him. It's like, I said be kind, like that. You shouldn't have to. And so when it's like God gives you the design of marriage, he gives you the purpose of marriage. Mm-hmm. And Jesus even clarifies it for, like, it's like when we go, well, what about this? Well, what about this? And we are in an age where polyamory and all these things are becoming more of a thing. It's like, we need to more than ever hold on to this and display it. And he doesn't have to go through and go, no, not that, no, not that, no, not that, no, not that, no, not that. He can tell you what it's supposed to be, and then we're supposed to go in that direction.
Yeah, and the using correctly the Genesis creation accounts and the purpose of how humanity is designed isn't. That kind of stuff is important for so many different subjects.
Right, especially as confused as our culture is right now.
Absolutely. I mean, like when it comes to transgenderism, it's like, where do you see explicitly in here that it says that is sinful? And it's like, well, no, there's not one command that says if you change, sexes, that's actually sinful. No, what we start with is Genesis 1 and 2. We see the design, and from design we see, throughout the rest of the scriptures, these threads that are pulled through that help us clearly see this. And that's why when you study the early church, as best I can tell, they were making it very clear. No. The early church fathers this is marriage between man and wife. It seems also, and I'm not remotely an expert, my general kind of survey of looking at early Jewish history from the time of Jesus is that it was trending in that direction as well. That by the time that you get later on in centuries, like Judaism has completely gone away from polygamy in any form.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it was a thing in Jesus' time from the stuff I was looking at, that polygamy wasn't practiced by the Jews in Jesus' day.
I think Josephus said that Herod had multiple wives, but Herod is a pagan by all accounts,
right, and
is not at all upheld as some moral, exemplary person. Right. So yeah.
He killed John the Baptist, so we don't like him. Also, in the instructions to the church, even if polygamy was practiced among Romans, which most of them didn't, but among the Greek-speaking peoples, Paul says that if you're going to be a pastor of a church, you have to be a one-woman man or husband of one wife.
Yeah, 1 Timothy 3, Titus 1.
Yeah, and that would apply to polygamy and also just someone who moves from marriage to marriage or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, so, all right, well, that's, I think, a pretty helpful quick summary on why polygamy is bad. And in some sense, you could say, well, why... This is not like a common thing in South Carolina. Why are we talking about it? Well, I think first you should understand the global church. There are parts of the globe where polygamy is legal in certain countries in Africa where they're having to reckon with this. So we should understand a little bit of what our brothers and sisters in Christ across the globe are having to reckon with. But also, polyamory is growing. It is, and we'll see how far down the rabbit hole this goes. But we're not far away from different people in the church trying to make the argument. Well, actually.
Right.
It doesn't say, and it's like, oh, no, you're, again, trying to use the Bible to to justify the desires of your own flesh, which is outside of God's design for humanity.
Yeah. And all of those do sound to me like, especially when we have the clear what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
All those arguments do sound like me talking to my son and him being like, well, you didn't say I couldn't poke his eye. It just is like, that fits into the categories I've already given you. So it doesn't have to say everything.
Cool. All right. That's our overtime on polygamy. Thanks, Chet.